Fluorescent lights hummed above her head, too bright, too loud, making everything feel exposed. The checkout line crawled forward inch by inch, plastic dividers snapping against conveyor belts, scanners chirping, strangers breathing too close behind her. She kept her eyes down. Her hands rested lightly on the basket handle, fingers curled around cold metal, steady only because she forced them to be. Inside the basket sat milk, generic bread, and beneath them, hidden deliberately, a white pharmacy bag with the top folded twice so no one could see the orange lettering. Prenatal vitamins. She shifted the bread slightly, making sure the label stayed covered. No one cared. No one was looking. That was how she survived. By not being seen. You got fat. The words landed softly, almost conversational, but they cut deeper than shouting ever had. Her spine stiffened before she even turned. She knew the voice instantly. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. He stood behind her like he had never left. Same height. Same familiar posture. Same expression that always carried quiet ownership. He smiled when she finally faced him, slow and satisfied, like he had expected this moment eventually. Like she had been waiting here for him. "Couldn't keep yourself together after I left?" he asked casually, eyes dragging down her body with deliberate slowness. Measuring. Assessing. His gaze lingered at her waist. Her stomach. Her throat tightened so hard it hurt. She forced her arms to remain still, forced her breathing to stay even. Around them people shifted. A woman pretended to read a magazine. A man adjusted his wallet. Everyone heard. No one intervened. That was how public humiliation worked. It needed witnesses who refused responsibility. He stepped closer. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same expensive scent that used to linger on her pillows long after he stopped coming home. "I told you," he continued quietly, his voice lowering so only she could hear. "No one else would want you." His fingers lifted slightly, hovering near her abdomen. Not touching. Almost touching. She stepped back immediately, the basket bumping against her leg. His eyes sharpened. He noticed everything. He always had. "Who is he asked. Not curious. Accusing. She didn't answer. Silence had always been safer. His jaw tightened slightly, irritation flickering through his expression. He leaned closer, his voice barely audible now. "You think you can replace me?" Her pulse thundered so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The cashier called the next customer. Plastic bags crinkled. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. None of it touched the space between them. Outside the glass storefront, rain had begun to fall, streaking neon reflections across the pavement. Parked along the curb, half hidden beneath a flickering street lamp, a black sedan idled quietly. Engine running. Windows tinted dark enough to erase whoever sat inside. The driver watched through the glass doors without moving. Without blinking. Inside, her ex exhaled sharply through his nose, studying her silence like it was defiance. "You should have stayed where you belonged," he murmured. "You were safer." The word safer felt like a threat. He reached again, faster this time, fingers brushing the fabric of her sleeve. She flinched before contact fully landed. That was all it took. He smiled again. Not kind. Not warm. Certain. Outside, the driver lifted a phone from the center console. The screen illuminated his face briefly. He typed only a few words. Sent them. Inside, she forced herself to move forward as the cashier called her turn. Her legs felt disconnected from her body. Mechanical. Fragile. She placed the basket down, avoiding eye contact with everyone, especially him. He didn't follow immediately. He watched. That was worse. Always watching. The cashier scanned the milk. Beep. Bread. Beep. The white pharmacy bag came last. The cashier reached for it automatically. Her hand shot out before she could stop herself. "I'll take that," she said quickly. Too quickly. Suspicion flickered across the cashier's face, then disappeared beneath polite indifference. Payment processed. Receipt printed. Transaction complete. She grabbed the bag and turned. He stood only inches away again, waiting, blocking the exit without touching her, without needing to. "You can't hide forever," he said quietly. The certainty in his voice hollowed her chest. She stepped around him anyway, pushed through the glass doors. Rain met her immediately, cool against overheated skin. She didn't look back. She didn't run. Running showed fear. Fear invited pursuit. Behind her, through the glass, he remained motionless beneath the fluorescent lights, watching her disappear into the rain. Across the street, the black sedan's engine continued to idle. The driver lowered the phone slowly, eyes following her every step as she walked alone down the sidewalk. He did not intervene. He did not approach. He only watched, because the message had already been delivered. Invisible women were easiest to corner, until someone powerful decided they weren't invisible anymore. Rain followed her the entire walk home, soaking the thin fabric at her shoulders, dripping from her hair into her eyes. She didn't slow down. Every reflection in every storefront window became a threat. Every passing engine made her chest tighten. She kept her head forward, hands clenched around the pharmacy bag until the paper softened beneath her grip. The streets were familiar. That was the problem. Familiar meant predictable. Predictable meant reachable. Her apartment building came into view at the end of the block, concrete stained by years of neglect, security light flickering weakly above the entrance. She climbed the steps quickly, keys already between her fingers before she reached the door. Inside, the hallway smelled like dust and old carpet. No voices, no movement, just the low electric hum of the building existing without caring who lived inside it. She reached her door, unlocked it, stepped inside, locked it again immediately. One deadbolt, then the second, then the third. The sound of metal sliding into place echoed louder than it should have. Only when the final lock settled did she allow her back to rest against the door. Her breath trembled in shallow bursts she couldn't control. Her body remembered him too well. The way he could appear without warning. The way his voice could still reach inside her chest and tighten something she had never fully reclaimed. Her hand lifted slowly, almost unconsciously, resting against her stomach. Flat. Unchanged to anyone else. But not to her. 7 weeks. 7 weeks since the quiet confirmation in a sterile clinic room where no one had said congratulations. 7 weeks since she realized she carried something that made her both stronger and more vulnerable at the same time. No one knew. Not her co-workers who barely remembered her name. Not her family who lived too far away to see the changes she hid beneath loose clothing. And especially not him. He had lost the right to know anything about her. She moved away from the door, setting the pharmacy bag gently on the kitchen counter. The room was small. One window. One narrow couch. One table that served as both workspace and dining surface. Safe only because it was insignificant. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her hand. The vibration jolted through her nerves like electricity. Unknown number. She stared at the screen until it stopped. Silence returned. She exhaled slowly. Then it buzzed again. Same number. Her thumb hovered above the screen. Don't answer. Her chest tightened. She answered. Hello. Silence answered first. Then breathing. Low. Familiar. Her stomach dropped. You think distance protects you. His voice was softer than it had been in the store. That made it worse. Calm meant patience. Calm meant certainty. She couldn't speak. The line disconnected. No goodbye. No threat spoken directly. He didn't need one. She lowered the phone slowly, staring at her reflection in the dark screen. Her hands were shaking again. She placed the phone face down on the table and forced herself to breathe. Her eyes drifted toward the window. The street lamp outside flickered against wet pavement. And there, parked across the street exactly where it had been before, sat the black sedan. Engine still running. Headlights off. Waiting. Her throat tightened. It hadn't followed her by accident. It had already been there. Watching. She stepped closer to the window, careful not to be seen directly, peering through the narrow gap beside the curtain. The tinted glass revealed nothing. No faces, no movement, just presence. Her phone buzzed again behind her. She flinched before turning. Another unknown number. Message this time. 3 words. See you. Her chest stopped rising, stopped falling. The room shrank around her. Her first instinct was denial. Wrong number. Mistake. But the sedan outside remained. Proof that mistakes didn't idle with engines running. She moved to the kitchen slowly, gripping the counter to steady herself. Her mind ran through possibilities faster than she could control. Her ex had never used anonymous messages before. He preferred direct intimidation. This was different, controlled, observational, intentional. Her hand returned to her stomach, pressing lightly as if reassurance could be transferred through skin. You're safe, she wanted to say. But she wasn't sure if it was true. Outside, the sedan's brake lights flickered briefly, then went dark again. Not leaving, just reminding her it could. Her phone buzzed once more. Same number. No new message. Just presence. Whoever it was didn't need to say anything else. They had already proven they could reach her. She turned off the apartment lights instinctively, plunging the room into shadow. Darkness made her harder to see, harder to study, but it also made her more alone. She sank slowly onto the edge of the couch, phone still in her hand, eyes fixed on the faint outline of the car beyond the rain-streaked glass. Secrets rarely stayed small when powerful men were involved. And somewhere outside, someone had decided her secret mattered. The office sat above the city like it didn't belong to it. Glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing the skyline in cold precision. Thousands of windows glowing, thousands of lives unfolding beneath his view. Giovanni Park stood motionless near the center of the room, one hand resting lightly against the polished surface of a black marble desk. The city never slept. Neither did he. A single tablet lay in front of him, its screen illuminated in the low light. Her face filled it. Not posed, not prepared. Captured outside the grocery store hours earlier, fluorescent light flattening her features, exhaustion visible in the subtle tension around her mouth. And beside her, too close, stood the man from her past. Giovanni's expression did not change, but the air in the room did. His lieutenant, Miho, stood several steps away, careful to remain silent until spoken to. He had worked beside Giovanni long enough to understand the difference between stillness and calm. This was not calm. Giovanni's finger moved slowly across the screen, opening the rest of the file. Employment history. Addresses that grew progressively smaller, cheaper, less secure. Medical records appeared next. He paused there. His eyes narrowed slightly as he read the clinical language, detached and precise. Prenatal confirmation. 7 weeks. He did not react outwardly. But Miho noticed the subtle shift in his posture, the way his shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly. Giovanni tapped once more. Another image appeared. Grainy security footage. Her entering her apartment building alone. Head lowered. Watching the ground. Who authorized surveillance? Giovanni's voice was quiet. Controlled. Miho hesitated. No one, he answered carefully. The truth hung between them. Giovanni already knew. He had ordered it himself. Weeks ago. Before the pregnancy confirmation. Before the grocery store encounter. Before she ever realized she was being observed. Giovanni's eyes returned to the photograph. Her hand pressed protectively against her abdomen. A gesture small enough most people would miss it. He hadn't. Her ex, Giovanni said after a moment. History. Miho stepped forward, placing a thin folder beside the tablet. Restraining complaint filed 2 years ago. Withdrawn 3 days later. No charges pursued. Multiple police responses to domestic disturbances. No arrests. Giovanni opened the folder slowly. Each page confirmed what he had already suspected. Patterns. Control. Isolation. Silence enforced by fear. His jaw tightened faintly. He didn't like unfinished violence. He didn't like men who believed ownership could be enforced through weakness. Miho spoke again, cautious. The sedan outside her building. Our team confirmed she noticed it. Giovanni said nothing. He already knew that too. Cameras had recorded her silhouette standing behind the curtain. Still, unmoving, aware. Fear changed behavior. Awareness accelerated it. You want her relocated? Miho asked. The question carried weight beyond its words. Relocation meant escalation. It meant acknowledgement. It meant declaring interest where none had existed publicly before. Giovanni didn't answer immediately. He zoomed in on the grocery store image, isolating the moment her ex leaned toward her. The man's hand extended toward her stomach. Possessive. Intrusive. Giovanni's hand curled slowly into a fist at his side. Not from anger. From decision. Protection required proximity. Proximity required visibility. Visibility required consequence. He set the tablet down with deliberate care. Increase external surveillance, he said quietly. Miho nodded. Discreet. Giovanni's eyes lifted, dark and steady. No, the single word shifted the room. Discretion implied distance. Distance implied hesitation. He was choosing neither. Miho hesitated. Her ex is affiliated, he said carefully. Low level but connected. Intervention will be noticed. Giovanni turned his gaze back toward the skyline. Far below, headlights traced the streets like veins carrying movement through the city's body. Everything connected eventually. Everything responded to pressure. Good, Giovanni said. Silence followed. Not confusion. Understanding. He picked up the tablet again, studying her face one more time. She didn't look powerful. She didn't look strategic. She looked tired. Vulnerable. Invisible. That had been the point. Invisible people were easier to erase. Easier to break. Easier to use. He had seen her months ago for the first time in a place she never noticed him. Watched the way she moved through rooms without expecting acknowledgement. Watched the way others overlooked her entirely. He had recognized something then. Not weakness. Endurance. The difference mattered. He placed the tablet down for the final time. She's under my protection now. The sentence landed heavier than volume could explain. Miho didn't respond immediately. Protection was not passive. Protection was declaration. It meant drawing lines others would test. It meant accepting retaliation before it arrived. It meant war without announcing it. Miho inclined his head. Understood. He stepped back, already preparing to execute orders he would never question aloud. Giovanni remained where he was, watching the reflection of the city in the glass. Somewhere below, she sat alone in a dark apartment, believing she had been seen by accident. Believing the sedan was a threat without knowing whose threat it was. Protection from powerful men always created enemies. And for the first time, she had been placed directly inside the reach of his power, without ever asking for it. The parking garage smelled like oil and cold concrete. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows between the rows of parked cars. Her footsteps echoed too loudly in the emptiness, each step sharper than it should have been. She kept her head down, keys already threaded between her fingers the way she had taught herself months ago. Habit. Survival disguised as routine. Her car waited near the far pillar, older than most of the vehicles around it. Something she could afford. Something no one would look twice at. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The black sedan she'd noticed outside her apartment earlier was nowhere in sight. That should have made her feel safer. Didn't. Footsteps sounded behind her. Not distant. Close. Matching her pace. Her spine stiffened. She didn't turn immediately. Denial always lasted a few seconds longer than logic. Then the footsteps sped up. Name. Spoken low. Familiar. She froze before she could stop herself. He stepped into her peripheral vision like he had every right to exist there. Same posture. Same expression. Calm in a way that felt rehearsed. Her ex smiled faintly, like this was coincidence instead of calculation. "You've been hard to reach," he said. She didn't answer. Her hand tightened around her keys. He stepped closer anyway. Too close. The smell of his cologne dragged memories forward she had spent months burying. "Ignoring me isn't smart," he continued softly. "You always answered before." Her heart pounded harder. He noticed. He always noticed fear. It encouraged him. She stepped sideways, trying to move past him. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist before she could react. Hard. Pain flared instantly, sharp and familiar. Her breath caught. "You don't ignore me," he said again, his voice lower now. Controlled. Possessive. She pulled back instinctively. His grip tightened in response, bones grinding together under pressure. "You belong in conversations that involve you," he added. The word belong made her stomach turn. She forced her voice to work. "Let go." He smiled again. Not kindly. "You think you're safe now?" he asked. "You think distance changes ownership?" Ownership. The word hung heavier than the concrete ceiling above them. She twisted her wrist again, desperate. Pain shot higher this time. Her keys slipped from her fingers, clattering against the floor. He leaned closer, lowering his voice until only she could hear. "Who is he?" he whispered. She didn't answer. Couldn't. He squeezed harder. Her knees nearly buckled. Then another hand appeared. Steady. Closing around his wrist. Not violently. Not urgently. Just firmly enough to interrupt control. The pressure vanished instantly. Her ex's hand released her as if burned. Giovanni Park stood beside her, close enough she could feel the quiet heat of his presence. He wore no expression. His dark coat fell perfectly into place, untouched by the grime of the garage. He didn't look at her ex immediately. He looked at her wrist, at the red imprint already forming beneath her skin. His gaze lingered there half a second longer than necessary. Then he spoke. "Release her." The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they carried absolute certainty. Her ex had already stepped back. Color drained from his face so quickly it looked unnatural. Recognition spread through him like infection. Fear replaced arrogance so completely it was disorienting to watch. "Mr. Park," he said, voice thinner now. Giovanni's eyes shifted to him for the first time. No anger. No raised voice. Just acknowledgement, which somehow felt worse. Silence stretched. Her ex swallowed hard. "I didn't realize," he began. Giovanni said nothing. He didn't need to. The absence of response forced compliance more effectively than threat ever could. Her ex stepped back another pace. Then another. His hands lifted slightly, instinctively non-threatening. "There's no problem," he added quickly. Giovanni's gaze never wavered. Finally her ex nodded once. Submission disguised as politeness. He turned and walked away faster than he had approached. His footsteps disappeared into the echoing distance. She stood frozen, breath shallow, wrist still throbbing. Giovanni didn't follow him, didn't acknowledge his retreat. He turned toward her fully instead. Close enough she could see the faint reflection of the overhead light in his eyes. Close enough she understood he had been there longer than she realized. "Are you hurt?" he asked. The question was softer than anything else he had said. She shook her head automatically. Reflex. Survival again. He noticed the hesitation anyway. His hand lifted slightly, then stopped short of touching her, respecting a boundary he could have ignored. That restraint unsettled her more than force would have. "He won't approach you again," Giovanni said calmly. It wasn't reassurance. It was conclusion. She stared at him, trying to understand how he could promise something the law never had. He turned slightly, already preparing to leave. Intervention complete. Efficient. controlled. As if moments like this existed inside his routine. She found her voice before he could walk away. Why? She asked. He paused, not turning back immediately. Because he understands consequence, Giovanni answered. Then he walked toward the exit, his footsteps fading into the same silence he had entered from. She remained where she was, her wrist aching, her keys still lying on the concrete. Her ex had never feared police, never feared warnings, never feared losing her. But he had feared Giovanni. Instantly. Completely. And she realized, with a cold certainty settling into her chest, that power spoke quietly when it knew it would be obeyed. The door of the black sedan closed behind her with a soft, airtight sound that erased the parking garage from existence. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something colder. Controlled. Giovanni sat beside her, not touching her, not crowding her. Just present. The city moved outside the tinted windows, blurred into streaks of light and shadow. No driver spoke. No radio played. Silence stretched between them until it began to feel deliberate. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, her wrists still aching where her ex had grabbed her. The red imprint remained visible against her skin. Giovanni noticed. He noticed everything. She stared forward, trying to slow her breathing. Nothing about tonight made sense. He had appeared too quickly, too precisely. Not coincidence, not luck. Intervention required knowledge. Knowledge required watching. Her voice came out quieter than she intended. How do you know me? Giovanni didn't answer immediately. He watched the city instead, as if selecting which truth to release. I was there, he said finally. The words meant nothing at first. Then memory shifted. Fragmented images pushing forward. The charity gala months ago. Crystal lights. Champagne glasses. Conversations she hadn't belonged in. She had attended as support staff. Invisible. Temporary. Replaceable. She remembered feeling dizzy. Overheated. Her drink untouched in her hand. She remembered stepping outside for air. The hallway empty. Her heels unsteady. Her vision blurring. And a man. Controlled. Standing between her and someone else she couldn't clearly recall. He had guided her toward the exit without touching her directly. His voice quiet. Protective without explanation. She had assumed he was security. She had never seen his face clearly. Till now. Her stomach tightened. That was you, she whispered. Giovanni nodded once. Confirmation without drama. The car continued moving. Her pulse accelerated. Why? She asked. He turned his head slightly. His gaze steady but unreadable. Because you were not safe, he said. The simplicity of the answer unsettled her more than complexity would have. She shook her head faintly. You didn't even know me. He didn't correct her immediately. That pause spoke louder than denial. She felt something colder begin forming beneath her ribs. He reached into the inner pocket of his coat. Slowly. Intentionally. He withdrew a thin folder and placed it on the seat between them. He didn't open it. Didn't force it toward her. Just allowed its presence to exist. She stared at it, afraid to touch it. Your medical appointment, he said quietly. 7 weeks ago. Her breath caught. She hadn't told anyone. Not even her doctor had spoken above a whisper. That information is private, she said automatically. He didn't argue. Didn't apologize. Yes, he agreed. Which meant he knew exactly what it required to access it. Her fingers hovered over the folder before pulling back. Why would you need that? She asked. He answered without hesitation. To confirm what I already suspected. Her throat tightened. Suspected. Not wondered. Not guessed. Suspected. Like a conclusion waiting for proof. Her mind raced backward. The gala. The dizziness. The blackout that never fully became unconsciousness. The moment outside. Present. Watching. Intervening. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. You've been watching me. It wasn't a question. Giovanni met her gaze fully now. He didn't deny it. Yes. The word landed harder than any threat could have. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. Protective. Defensive. Terrified. He followed the motion with his eyes. Not possessive. Not detached. Certain. You didn't know, she said faintly. Not then. He tilted his head slightly. I knew enough. Silence returned. Heavy. Suffocating. She stared at him, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the stranger from her memory. With a stranger who knew things no one should know. Why me? She asked. His answer came without hesitation. Because you were alone. The truth in it made her chest tighten painfully. Alone was accurate. Alone was predictable. Alone was easy to control. Her voice dropped. And now? He watched her for a long moment before answering. Now you are not. The words should have comforted her. Instead, they narrowed the world around her. She swallowed hard. You said I was under your protection, she said. Protection from what? He didn't look away. From consequences that already exist. That wasn't reassurance. That was confirmation. Her fingers trembled against her stomach. He noticed again. Of course he did. His voice lowered slightly. Not softer. More precise. The child, he said. Her heart stuttered violently. He didn't pause. Didn't soften it. Didn't delay it. Is mine. The sentence fractured the air between them. Her breath vanished completely. Sound disappeared. The city outside became meaningless motion. She stared at him, waiting for correction. Clarification. Nothing. None came. His expression remained calm. Certain. Final. Her mind rejected it instinctively. No, she whispered. He didn't argue. He didn't persuade. He simply held her gaze. Certainty against disbelief. Her hands pressed harder against her stomach. Protecting. Questioning. Terrified. The memory of that night twisted deeper now. The intervention. Quiet control. The access to records. The surveillance before she even knew she was pregnant. This was never coincidence. Never rescue. Never random. This had begun long before she understood she was part of it. The car slowed as it approached an intersection, the red light bleeding across the windshield like warning. She realized, with a cold clarity settling through her veins, that every step she had taken since that gala might have been seen, measured, anticipated. She turned toward him fully, her voice barely audible. Did you protect me, she asked, or did you plan this? He didn't answer immediately, and the silence between the question and whatever came next felt more dangerous than anything he had said so far. By morning, her face existed somewhere it had never existed before. Public. Permanent. She didn't see it at first. She woke in a room too large to belong to her, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooked a city she barely recognized from this height. The sheets were softer than anything she had ever touched. The air quiet, controlled, safe in a way that felt unfamiliar. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the car, his voice, the sentence that had fractured everything. The child is mine. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach again. Still small, still hidden, but no longer hers alone. A soft knock came at the door. She stiffened. It opened slowly, not waiting for permission. A woman stepped inside carrying folded clothes. Professional. Silent. She placed them neatly at the foot of the bed without meeting her eyes. Mr. Park asked that you wear these today, she said gently. Not offered. The difference was intentional. The door closed behind her. She stared at the clothing. Tailored. Precise. Measured without her presence. He had anticipated her size, her shape, her existence here. Her phone rested on the bedside table. She reached for it. 32 missed calls. Unknown numbers. Her ex's name repeated again and again. Messages beneath. You think he owns you now? Answer me. You can't hide forever. Another message arrived as she watched. I know where you are. Her breath hitched. Before she could react, the screen changed. The message vanished, replaced by a blank notification. Someone had erased it remotely. Her stomach tightened. Even her fear wasn't private anymore. She stood slowly and moved toward the window. The city looked peaceful from above. Untouchable. Down below, black vehicles sat parked along the street. Motionless, watching, protecting, containing. She turned as the bedroom door opened again. This time Giovanni entered. Alone. His presence shifted the air instantly. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning her face, her posture, the phone still clutched in her hand. He noticed everything. You should not read messages from him, he said calmly. Not angry. Certain. You erased them, she replied. He didn't deny it. Yes. Her chest tightened. You don't have the right. His expression didn't change. I have responsibility. Responsibility. Not ownership. Not control. Something worse. Something quieter. She looked down at the clothes waiting on the bed. What is this? She asked. Protection, he said simply. The word carried weight now. She exhaled shakily. Protection means choice, she said. This doesn't feel like choice. He studied her for a moment, as if measuring the truth inside her words. Choice exists, he said quietly. But consequences exist with it. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a message. It was news. She stared at the notification. Her own face stared back at her from the screen. Grainy. Taken at night. Her entering his building beside him. Headline beneath. Unknown woman enters Park Tower after midnight visit. Speculation rises. Her fingers went cold. No, she whispered. She opened the article. More photos. Angles she hadn't seen. Security cameras. Street cameras. Someone had followed them. Documented it. Released it. Comments scrolled beneath. Who is she? Mistress. Target. Weakness. Her breathing became uneven. They know, she said faintly. Giovanni stepped closer. Not touching. Present. Yes. His honesty felt like gravity. She looked up at him. My ex will see this. Giovanni's jaw tightened slightly. He already has. Her heart pounded violently now. Exposure erased distance. Exposure erased hiding. Exposure erased safety. You said you would protect me, she whispered. He met her gaze fully. I am. The certainty in his voice didn't calm her. It confirmed the scale of what she had entered. Another knock interrupted them. His lieutenant stepped inside briefly. The media is escalating, he said. And the rival families are watching closely. Giovanni nodded once. No hesitation. No surprise. The lieutenant left. Giovanni turned back to her. You will remain here, he said. Her stomach dropped. Remain, she repeated. For how long? He didn't answer immediately. That silence gave her the truth before his words did. Until it is safe. If. The word sounded permanent now. She moved toward the window again, staring down at the city she could no longer walk through anonymously. Every street below belonged to someone watching. Every shadow carried consequence. She had lived invisibly her entire life. Invisible meant survival. Invisible meant freedom. Now everyone could see her. And being seen by powerful men meant never disappearing again. Behind her, Giovanni spoke quietly. No one will touch you. She believed him. That was what terrified her most. Because protection from him meant exposure to everything else. She wrapped her arms around herself instinctively. The penthouse doors locked automatically behind them with a soft mechanical sound. Final. Contained. She realized with a slow, sinking certainty that anonymity had been the only safety she truly owned. And it was gone. The room fell silent when she entered. Not because she belonged there. Because she wasn't supposed to. The long table stretched across polished black stone, lined with men who had built their power through violence and discipline. They didn't hide their reactions. Some stared openly. Others avoided looking at her entirely. Giovanni walked beside her, calm, unaffected, as if this disruption was intentional, as if bringing her into the center of his leadership was strategy, not impulse. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table and sat. He did not gesture for her to leave. He did not introduce her. He simply allowed her to remain standing at his side. That alone shifted the balance in the room. One captain leaned toward another, whispering just loud enough to be heard. "This is reckless." Another voice answered quietly. "She's leverage now." Giovanni heard them. He always heard everything. But he said nothing yet. His fingers rested lightly on the table, still, controlled. "We have external pressure," one lieutenant began, attempting to redirect attention. "Media attention has increased. Surveillance on our legitimate holdings has doubled. Rivals are testing boundaries." His eyes flicked briefly toward her. Because of exposure. The implication settled like dust. Giovanni didn't react. "We respond as planned," Giovanni said calmly. "Maintain operations. No escalation without authorization." A captain on the far end spoke before he could stop himself. "Authorization has already escalated." Silence dropped again. He continued, voice tighter now. "You moved her into the tower. Publicly. You allowed images to surface. They see weakness." Giovanni turned his head slowly toward him. The movement alone forced the room to still completely. "Weakness," Giovanni repeated softly. The captain swallowed but didn't retreat. "Emotion clouds judgment." The word emotion hung heavier than any accusation. She felt the air tighten beside her. Giovanni didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand. He simply asked, "Do you believe I am compromised?" The captain hesitated too long. That hesitation answered for him. Giovanni stood. The scrape of his chair against marble sounded louder than it should have. He walked the length of the table without rushing. Every man tracked his movement carefully. When he stopped behind the captain, he rested one hand lightly on the back of the man's chair. Not forceful. Certain. "Stand," Giovanni said. The captain obeyed instantly. Habit stronger than fear. Giovanni faced the rest of the room. "Authority is not questioned through whispers," he said calmly. "It is questioned openly." No one spoke. No one breathed too loudly. Giovanni reached forward and removed the captain's signet ring. The symbol of command. The symbol of trust. He placed it on the table. The sound of metal touching stone echoed unnaturally sharp. "You no longer command territory," Giovanni said. The captain's face drained of color. "Sir." Giovanni didn't look at him. "You will remain under observation until loyalty is confirmed." Observation. Not forgiveness. Not freedom. Two guards stepped forward immediately. They didn't grab him. They didn't need to. The captain walked out under his own power. The door closed behind him. And just like that, years of authority disappeared in seconds. She felt her chest tighten. This was her fault. She didn't need anyone to say it. She could feel it in the silence left behind. No one met her eyes now. Not out of respect. Out of calculation. Giovanni returned to his seat. "Come again." Unmoved. As if removing a captain was routine. As if emotion had nothing to do with it. But the room had already changed. Loyalty had shifted into fear. And fear bred survival. One lieutenant finally spoke carefully. "Operations will continue uninterrupted." Giovanni nodded once. "They will." The meeting ended without dismissal. Men rose slowly, each one avoiding unnecessary movement, each one thinking, each one recalculating. She stepped back as they passed, feeling the weight of their awareness settle onto her. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer background. She was the reason power had shifted. When the last man left, Only Giovanni remained. He didn't look at her immediately. He studied the ring resting on the table, the symbol he had just taken. "You didn't need to do that," she said quietly. He answered without looking up. "Yes, I did." She hesitated. "Because of me." Now he looked at her. His expression revealed nothing. "Because of disloyalty." The distinction was intentional, but incomplete. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "They think I weaken you." Giovanni stood slowly. He was close enough now that she could see the faint tension in his jaw. Their thoughts do not define reality, but thoughts created action, and action created betrayal. Outside the glass walls, the city moved normally. Cars, lights, distance. Inside, something irreversible had begun. Fear didn't disappear when authority proved itself. Fear adapted. She realized the danger wasn't only outside his empire. It was inside. It was watching, waiting, calculating whether protecting her had made him vulnerable enough to challenge. Giovanni turned away from the table. The ring remained where he left it. Visible, permanent, a message to anyone who doubted him. She followed him toward the door, the silence heavier than before. Behind them the empty chair remained. Proof that loyalty could vanish instantly. Proof that emotion had consequences. And somewhere beyond those walls, someone who had watched that moment unfold was already deciding what to do next. The glass exploded before she understood the sound. 1 second the penthouse was silent, wrapped in the soft glow of the city skyline. The next, the window behind her shattered inward with a violent crack, fragments scattering across marble and carpet like ice. She screamed without meaning to. The noise wasn't human. It was impact, force, death entering without warning. Giovanni moved before the sound finished echoing. His arm locked around her waist, pulling her down hard behind the reinforced stone island. Another crack followed. Closer. Sharper. A bullet buried itself in the wall where her head had been seconds earlier. She couldn't breathe. Her ears rang. Giovanni's body covered hers completely. His weight steady, controlled, shielding her without hesitation. His hand pressed firmly against the back of her head. "Stay down," he said quietly. Not panic. Instruction. The calm made it worse, because it meant he understood exactly what was happening. Across the room, alarms triggered automatically. Hidden systems activating. Steel panels slid partially over exposed glass. Footsteps thundered from the hallway. His guards. Weapons drawn. Voices sharp. Coordinated. Sniper northeast tower. Movement detected. Lockdown initiated. Giovanni didn't release her until the third guard confirmed interior safety. Only then did he rise slowly, keeping himself between her and the broken window. She stayed on the floor, hands shaking, staring at the fragments around her. The air smelled like dust and gunpowder. Real. Immediate. He stepped toward the ruined glass, eyes scanning the distant rooftop across the street. His expression didn't change. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. He had expected this eventually. Behind him, a guard's voice crackled through an earpiece. Shooter attempting retreat. Giovanni didn't turn. "Alive," he said calmly. The single word carried absolute authority. Not dead. Alive. Questions mattered more than revenge. Minutes stretched longer than they should have. She sat frozen, watching his silhouette against the city lights, realizing he hadn't looked back at her yet. Not because he didn't care, because he was already solving the threat. Another voice broke the silence. Target secured. Giovanni's eyes closed briefly. Relief too small for anyone else to notice. He turned back to her then. His gaze softened, not emotionally but in focus. Confirming. Assessing. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. Words refused to form. He crouched beside her, brushing a shard of glass away from her sleeve carefully. His fingers hovered near her wrist but didn't touch. Restraint. Always restraint. The guards dragged the shooter into the penthouse less than 10 minutes later. Blood streaked across the man's forehead where he had resisted arrest. His hands were bound behind his back. He stumbled as they forced him forward. Giovanni stood to meet him. The room fell silent again. The shooter avoided looking at Giovanni directly. He stared at the floor instead. Smart enough to understand proximity to power. Giovanni spoke first. "Who sent you?" No threat. No raised voice. Just certainty. The shooter hesitated. One guard tightened his grip. Pain broke his silence. "I was paid." Giovanni didn't blink. "By who?" The shooter swallowed hard. His voice cracked. "Her husband." The words settled into the air like poison. She felt the world tilt slightly. Her ex, the man who had mocked her, cornered her, watched her disappear into someone else's protection. He hadn't stopped. He had escalated. Giovanni didn't react outwardly, but the room felt colder instantly. "Amount?" Giovanni asked. The shooter answered quickly now. "Enough to disappear." Giovanni nodded once. Confirmation. Motive. Finality. He turned slightly toward his lieutenant. "Remove him." The shooter panicked instantly. "Wait, I told you," Giovanni interrupted calmly. "I did not promise mercy." The guards dragged him back toward the door. His voice dissolved into pleading, into survival instinct, into nothing. The door closed. Silence returned. She stared at Giovanni. "You're going to kill him," she whispered. He met her gaze evenly. "Yes." No hesitation. No apology. The simplicity terrified her more than the gunshot. Because it wasn't anger driving him. It was decision. Moments later, a single distant gunshot echoed faintly through the private corridor. Clean. Final. She flinched. Giovanni didn't. His attention had already shifted forward. Planning consequences. Not mourning actions. A lieutenant stepped forward carefully. Police scanners picked up the discharge. Giovanni nodded slightly. Course they had. Violence never stayed invisible forever. Attention would come now. Questions. Surveillance. Pressure. Every action created exposure. Victory carried cost. Giovanni turned toward the broken window again. The city remained unchanged. Traffic moving. Lights flickering. No one aware how close power had come to collapsing inside this room. Behind him, she realized something irreversible had happened. He hadn't delegated her safety. He had enforced it personally. That distinction mattered. Because personal protection was never temporary. It was commitment. It was ownership. It was war. He walked back toward her slowly, stopping just close enough for his presence to block the cold air pouring through the shattered glass. "He won't try again," Giovanni said quietly. She understood he wasn't talking about the shooter. He meant her ex. He meant anyone. But safety didn't feel like relief. Felt like escalation. Somewhere beyond those walls, law enforcement had heard the shot. Rivals had heard the message. And men who once ignored her existence now understood she could move him to violence. Giovanni looked down at her. His voice barely above a whisper. "No one touches you," sounded less like reassurance, and more like declaration. Outside, sirens began to rise faintly in the distance. The locks changed overnight. She noticed it first in the sound. A heavier click when doors opened. A second delay before elevators responded. Subtle differences, invisible to anyone who belonged there. But she didn't belong. Not originally. She stood in the center of the penthouse living room, staring at the skyline she had once admired from the outside. It looked different now. Closer. And farther away at the same time. A guard stood near the entrance. Another near the hall leading to the private wing. Neither spoke. Neither pretended not to watch her. Their presence wasn't hidden anymore. It was permanent. She walked toward the elevator anyway. Habit. Instinct. The guard stepped forward immediately. Respectful. Firm. You can't go down alone. She froze. I just need air. He didn't move. We'll arrange it. Arrange it. Permission disguised as service. She turned away slowly, her chest tightening. Hours later, she stood in the same place, realizing no one had arranged anything. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Silence answered first. Then breathing. Familiar breathing. Her ex. You think he can hide you forever? He whispered. Her hand shook. She hung up. Immediately, one of the guards stepped closer. Was that him? She didn't answer. It didn't matter. They already knew. Everything inside this place was monitored. Giovanni had said it was for her safety. She believed him. That was the problem. Because safety and control felt identical now. 2 days later, her employer called. His voice sounded strained. Apologetic. We have to terminate your position. She didn't argue. She had expected it. Businesses avoided proximity to men like Giovanni. Proximity created risk. Liability. She ended the call and stared at her reflection in the black glass of the window. She no longer recognized the woman staring back. The door behind her opened quietly. Giovanni entered without announcing himself. He moved with the same calm presence. His attention focused entirely on her. You lost your job. It wasn't a question. She nodded. He stepped closer. You won't need it. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. That made them heavier. I needed it, she said softly. He studied her expression carefully. You need safety more. She didn't answer. Because he wasn't wrong. And that truth frightened her most. Days passed differently inside his world. Structured. Controlled. Her medical appointments happened inside private clinics now. Doctors came to her. She never waited in public rooms. Never signed her own paperwork. Her name appeared less often. His appeared everywhere. One afternoon she paused outside his office door. It was slightly open. Voices carried through the gap. His lieutenant spoke first. The council needs confirmation. Giovanni answered calmly. They will have it. Silence followed. Then the lieutenant again. If the child is yours. Succession changes. Her breath caught. Succession. Not protection. Not safety. Inheritance. She stepped back before they could see her. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The child hadn't chosen this. Neither had she. That evening, Giovanni found her standing alone near the glass wall overlooking the city. He stopped beside her, not touching, just present. You heard, he said quietly. She didn't pretend otherwise. You never told me. He watched the traffic below. I was waiting until it was certain. Certain of what? She asked. He turned toward her then. His voice remained calm, but something deeper moved beneath it. That they would recognize you. She understood immediately. Recognition wasn't protection. It was declaration. It made her visible to everyone who mattered. And everyone who wanted leverage. I didn't agree to that, she whispered. His expression didn't change. You agreed to survive. The words settled between them. Cold, honest, irreversible. The next morning, the compound expanded its security again. New personnel. New vehicles. She watched from the window as black sedans arrived in formation. Guards rotated shifts in precise coordination. Systems recalibrated around her existence. Her phone no longer connected to outside networks without approval. Her messages filtered through secure servers. Even the air felt different. Filtered. That afternoon, a woman she didn't recognize entered the penthouse. Elegant. Controlled. Giovanni's mother. She approached slowly, her eyes resting briefly on her stomach. Not judgmental. Assessing. You are important now, she said simply. Not congratulations. Not welcome. Importance carried responsibility. Importance carried consequence. After she left, the silence returned heavier than before. That night, She stood alone in the nursery room his staff had begun preparing without asking her. Soft colors. Careful furniture. A future she hadn't chosen being constructed around her. Giovanni appeared behind her quietly. "You can still leave," he said. She turned toward him. "Can I?" He didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was enough. Because leaving would no longer erase what she carried. It would only remove protection, not attention. He stepped closer, his voice low. "No one will harm you here." She believed him completely. That certainty should have comforted her. Instead, it confirmed the truth she had begun to understand. Safety had replaced freedom so gradually she hadn't noticed the exact moment it happened. She rested her hand against the glass, watching her reflection merge with the city lights beyond it. Somewhere outside those walls, she had once belonged to herself. Inside them, she belonged to survival. And survival belonged to him. The city went quiet before sunrise. Not naturally. Not peacefully. Quiet the way streets become after something has ended. From the penthouse glass, she could see fewer headlights moving below. Fewer late-night deliveries. Even the distant sirens had stopped. Silence spread like something deliberate. She stood barefoot on the cold marble, arms folded loosely across herself, watching the horizon begin to pale. Behind her, the penthouse remained awake. Guards rotated positions. Doors opened and closed softly. Radios whispered coded confirmations. No one spoke her name. But everything moved because of her. She had learned to recognize the difference. The door behind her opened. Giovanni stepped inside. He wore the same dark suit he had left an hours earlier. No loosened tie. No visible fatigue. Only stillness. He stopped beside her without touching. For a long time neither spoke. She watched the skyline. He watched her reflection in the glass. Finally she asked very quietly, "Is it over?" He did not answer immediately. His gaze moved downward. His hand lifted slowly, hovering for a moment before resting lightly against her stomach. Not pressing, not claiming, just contact, responsibility without force. "Yes," he said. The word carried weight beyond its sound. She didn't ask what over meant. She already understood. The calls had stopped during the night. The threats, the unknown numbers breathing into silence. Her ex had vanished from every system his organization monitored. Police databases listed him as missing. Financial records frozen. Associates unreachable. Erased carefully. Completely. She felt no satisfaction. Only absence. And something heavier. The cost of resolution she had never asked for. Giovanni stepped away, moving toward the table behind them. Several folders rested there. Legal documents. Transfer confirmations. Statements. His lieutenant entered quietly, waiting for acknowledgement. Giovanni signed without hesitation. Each signature permanent. Each stroke reshaping something larger than either of them. The lieutenant hesitated before speaking. "The council is assembled." Giovanni nodded once. "Prepare the announcement." The lieutenant's eyes flicked briefly toward her. Respectful. Measuring. He left without another word. She turned toward Giovanni slowly. "Announcement." His voice remained calm. "They need certainty." She understood immediately. Certainty was currency in his world. Uncertainty invited challenge. He approached her again, stopping close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence without contact. "You don't have to stand there," he said quietly. It wasn't a command. It was the closest he came to asking. She held his gaze. "If I don't, they'll believe I'm temporary." He didn't deny it. Minutes later, the private conference room filled with his inner circle. Men who had built empires through obedience and fear. Screens activated across the walls, connecting to locations across the city. Faces appeared. Silent. Waiting. Giovanni entered first. She followed half a step behind. The room noticed immediately. Not her presence. Her position. Beside him. not behind. He stopped at the center. No speech prepared. No dramatic pause. His voice carried without effort. The conflict is resolved. No one interrupted. No one questioned. He reached for her hand. His fingers closed around hers, not tightly. Steadily. He continued. They belong to me. The words were quiet. Certain. Final. No explanation offered. None required. The silence that followed confirmed understanding. Not approval. Not disapproval. Acceptance. His lieutenant inclined his head. Others followed. One by one. Acknowledgement moving through the room like falling dominoes. The announcement ended as simply as it began. Greens darkened. Chairs emptied. The machinery of his empire recalibrated around a new center. When they were alone again, Giovanni released her hand immediately. He didn't look at her. He moved to the window instead, watching the first edge of sunlight break across the buildings. She studied him carefully. That was for them, she said. He nodded once. She waited. What was it for you? He didn't answer right away. The light grew stronger, painting the room in pale gold. Finally he spoke. So no one mistakes your existence again. The words settled into her chest. Heavy. Permanent. She stepped beside him, watching the city wake beneath them. People would walk those streets without knowing what had been decided above them. Without knowing how close danger had come. Without knowing how completely it had been erased. She rested her hand over her stomach, feeling nothing yet. Only possibility. Giovanni stood beside her, close enough to shield, far enough not to confine. For the first time since entering his world, she understood the shape of her future. Not freedom. Not captivity. Something between. Protection with weight. Safety with consequence. He noticed her when no one else did. Now no one else could touch her. She exhaled slowly, watching the sunlight spread across glass and steel. Somewhere beyond those buildings, her old life still existed. Smaller now. Fading. He had called her protected. The world would call her claimed. And in his world there was no difference.